Oftentimes we humans like to invent concepts that fit our worldview. I believe morality is one of these things, like when people talk about morality, it's usually this like nebulous concept that often the actual like definitions or understandings get lost somewhere along the way. And very few people actually provide any clarification along like what these things actually mean. And then we take them, not really knowing what they mean, and then we use them in our life like we think we know what they mean. Let's investigate what morality is, okay? So I'm going to read the definition provided by the Oxford Press that I found just from Googling what does morality mean. Morality is the principles concerning the distinction between right and wrong or good and bad behavior, okay? So essentially what this is saying morality is that it's concerned with behavior and that it's concerned with making a judgment in duality, okay? So a certain behavior is either right or wrong or good or bad. I feel this is intellectual laziness. And the reason why is because it allows no room for nuance and understanding about any particular situation. Like nowadays with the advent of platforms such as Twitter and the way people use other things like Facebook and Instagram, we're communicating in very, very short spurts. And oftentimes that totally takes context and nuance away from any particular situation. It also takes tone out of a situation too, because it's much more difficult to read tone digitally than in person. But, essentially, this concept of morality is, widely taught and widely talked about, and yet, there doesn't really seem to be any kind of consensus on what morality actually is. So, is it a false construct? Let's investigate. Who makes the judgment on what is moral or not, right? So if it's only right or wrong or good or bad, then that means it must be one or the other. And that means that somewhere along the way, someone is making a judgment as to which particular behavior or action or thought or feeling that is, right? So is this action a good action or is it a bad action? Are you being a good boy or a bad boy? We'll talk more about what good and bad means in a later video, but I want to focus on morality specifically right here, okay? Do we remember what judgment is? From our previous video, we talked about judgment. Judgment is a human's view of what is acceptable behavior. A human's view on what is acceptable behavior. So, if it's a human that's determining what is moral or not, good or bad, or right or wrong, we know that there's a high probability that their view probably does not match with the Creator's view. In fact, I'm certain it doesn't match with the Creator's view because actually the Creator doesn't engage in duality. How do I know this? Because I've asked her. Here is how the Creator's view goes on behavior. There is a spectrum from loving behavior from the Creator's perspective all the way to evil behavior. Okay? And in between is a huge spectrum of non-loving behavior. Okay? So you'll hear me use that phrase quite a bit. You probably already have non-loving behavior. I leave it intentionally vague because it could be anything in here. It's also intentionally vague is because we don't really exhibit truly loving behavior from the Creator's view very often. I mean, sometimes we do, but but it's not really that often. Okay? So, like, everything we do falls on this spectrum of non-loving. Okay? So, like, let's take, for example, the discipline of a child. Let's say you're a parent and you're disciplining your child. Now, I'm going to make another video in the future explaining how your children's disciplinary issues are actually related to the parent's law of attraction. But I'll go into detail more on that later. But for now, let's say you're a parent and you're disciplining your child. Okay? Well, let's say you choose to use corporal punishment and you hit a child. Okay? Or assault, which is really what it is, right? Like, again, if we're telling the truth, we're calling things what they are. If you're striking a person, it's assault. If you did that to an adult, you would be arrested and go to jail. But when you do that to your child, it's considered discipline. Wonder why we live in such a violent and angry world, huh? Okay, so let's say you assault your child as a form of discipline, okay? Well, I would put that pretty far down here on the non-loving scale, okay? It's not quite evil, but it's pretty close. It's pretty close, okay? Let's take a different action, right? Let's say you're still disciplining your child, but let's say instead of hitting them, let's say you yell at them. You are a large adult human, and you are projecting anger at a small human. Now, of course, you're in error for doing this because that's your law of attraction, but we'll talk about that later. Is yelling less harmful to the child than assaulting them? Yes. Is yelling at a child still non-loving? Yes. So let's say that's here. Do you see, there's no good or bad, but one is more loving than the other, or one is less loving than the other, okay? Let's say you let's say you are seething with rage, but you calmly talk to your child. That's better. But you are still suppressing your own emotions, and they absorb that. They can feel your anger, okay? Now, you're not yelling at them, okay, but they can still feel it. So let's put that over here. Okay? Do you see the progression? So if this is all true, right, then in God's view, what would be a loving way to discipline your child? How about through restriction of behavior and movement? If you want to act this way, small child, then the consequence will be that I am going to hold you very tight and restrict your behavior and love you. And you will know that you are loved. And you can writhe around and you can scream and cry, but I as the parent know that you are my law of attraction, and I will feel my emotions, but I am going to let you know that I love you, but your behavior is non-loving, and therefore I am going to restrict you. And this is how I teach you. That's loving behavior. How do I know that? Because that is how the Creator disciplines her children. So here we can see there's nothing good or bad about any of this, and there's nothing right or wrong about any of this. This is a spectrum of behavior that increasingly becomes more loving until it is loving. Or, conversely, it is a decreasing spectrum of non-loving behavior until it becomes evil. So I think our conclusion is that morality is a false human construct. Most of us were taught this: right, wrong, good, bad. And also most of us have, through our own experience, learned that the world is more complex than that. This is why. Because God doesn't view the world in this way. And if we start addressing our own emotional state, being humble, living in truth, asking for God's love, and asking for His truth in any particular circumstance, we will, again, feel out our suppressed emotions. Anger covers fear, covers sadness, right? So when we work through those layers of emotions, we will learn on any particular topic. Now, let's say you're a person who hits their children, assaults their children, and you do it because you learned how to do it because you were assaulted. Well, before you can change your own emotional state about you assaulting your children, you are going to have to feel out your own sadness about being assaulted yourself. And that in those moments, you're not being loved. And it's these moments where we're experiencing trauma that our soul's belief changes. So if you're a person that assaults your child, it's because you have learned that assaulting your child is loving behavior. And that is a false belief from the Creator's view. Okay? So if you feel out your grief, your intense grief over not feeling loved by your parents, you will lose the desire to act in the same way towards your children. Again, you become automatically more emotionally and more intellectually intelligent when we receive the Creator's love and learn her truth. So, in conclusion, this is just another human construct. Be on the lookout for judgments. They're a human's view of acceptable behavior, and humans built the place we're in, and it's a mess. So clearly, we shouldn't be looking to other humans for answers. We should be looking to our parent, which is God, for the answers. So, good luck with this, my friends. Love and peace.